Darius King, a composed black man in his 30s, strolled through Martin Grove Park in Memphis. It was his day off from work, and he welcomed the rare moment of peace. Dressed in jeans and a dark hoodie, he blended in with every other local. The sun was beginning to dip, casting a golden hue across the benches and trees. As he walked, jazz played softly through his earbuds, but that peace shattered when two police cruisers roared up beside him. Officers Reynolds and Kincaid leaped out, hands near their holsters. "You, stop right there," Reynolds shouted. Darius paused, startled. "Me? What's wrong?" "You match a description," Kincaid said sharply. "Keep your hands where we can see them." Darius complied, raising his hands. "I haven't done anything, I'm just walking." Reynolds circled him. "What's your name?" "Darius King. Don't get smart. Turn around." Before Darius could respond, Reynolds shoved him against a tree. Kincaid yanked his arms behind his back and slapped on cuffs. A few passers-by began filming. One woman screamed, "Why are you arresting him? He didn't do anything." Resisting and acting suspicious, Reynolds growled. "I wasn't resisting," Darius said calmly, wincing from the pressure on his wrist. Kincaid leaned in. "People like you always say that." Darius kept his voice steady. "People like me? You don't even know who I am," Reynolds grinned. "We know enough." As the officers pushed him into the back seat, Darius fell silent, but inside he was seething, not just with anger but with quiet calculation, because tucked beneath his hoodie, inside his jacket, was a leather badge case. Not a fake, not local, he was a federal agent, and they had just made a career-ending mistake. The inside of the cruiser was tight and cold. Darius sat still, his hands cuffed behind him, the steel biting into his wrists. The jazz in his ears had been replaced by the hum of injustice. He glanced into the rearview mirror, locking eyes with Reynolds. "So, Darius," Reynolds sneered, "you got anything you want to confess before we book you?" Darius remained calm. "I already told you I didn't do anything." Kincaid chuckled. "That's what they all say." The streets of Memphis blurred past. Darius didn't bother protesting. He knew it wouldn't matter. These two had already judged him the moment they saw his skin. Any calm explanation would be twisted into attitude. He could feel the badge case pressing lightly against his ribs, heavy with meaning. His ID, his authority, everything that proved who he really was. But he didn't show it yet, not here, not until it mattered. They reached the precinct. Kincaid yanked the door open and pulled Darius out roughly. "You think you're smart, huh?" Darius simply said, "I'm patient." As they walked him inside, heads turned. He heard a few murmurs. "What's he doing here?" "He's not a suspect, is he?" No one stopped them. Darius was processed like a street criminal, fingerprinted, mugshotted, and locked in a holding room. And then Sergeant Willis walked by. He froze in his tracks. "Wait a minute, King?" Darius lifted his chin slightly. "That's right." Willis turned pale. "From the FBI?" Reynolds looked confused. "Wait, what?" Darius finally pulled the badge from inside his coat. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I'm Special Agent Darius King, Organized Crime Division." Reynolds's face drained of color. The room went dead silent. Now it was Darius's turn to watch them squirm. Sergeant Willis immediately ordered the cuffs removed. "Get them off him, now!" he snapped. Reynolds hesitated, but one glare from Willis was enough. Kincaid fumbled with the key. As the cuffs clicked open, Darius stepped back, rubbing his wrists. "You had no right." Willis barked at Reynolds and Kincaid. "Did you even ask for ID?" "He matched the description," Reynolds mumbled. "And that gave you cause to tackle and cuff him without verifying anything?" Willis shook his head in disbelief. Darius folded his arms. "I told them I was just walking. They didn't care." Willis looked mortified. "Agent King, I am truly sorry. I didn't know." Darius cut him off. "They didn't even check. Just saw a black man in a hoodie." Within minutes, Internal Affairs was called. Officer Wallace from IA arrived, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a clipboard. She took Darius aside first. He explained every detail calmly, clearly. "Do you have body cam footage?" she asked. "They turned them off," Darius replied. "But several civilians recorded it." Wallace raised an eyebrow. "That's a violation in itself." Outside, Reynolds and Kincaid paced nervously. When Wallace brought them in for questioning, they looked deflated. "You understand what you've done, right?" she asked. "We didn't know he was FBI," Kincaid said. "You didn't care who he was," Darius replied coldly. "That's the issue." Wallace nodded slowly. "This is going up the chain." Darius didn't smile. He wasn't here for revenge. He was here for accountability. "Let them feel what it's like," he said softly, "to be judged before being known." The officers sat in stunned silence. For the first time they realized just how badly they'd messed up. The next morning the story exploded. A local blogger had posted footage of Darius being tackled and arrested, adding the shocking update: victim was actually an FBI agent. By noon, national outlets picked it up. CNN, FBI agent arrested by local cops without cause. MSNBC, racial profiling exposed in Memphis precinct. Fox, federal agent mistaken for criminal. Sparks police investigation. Social media went wild. Hashtags like hashtag FBI while black, hashtag badge didn't matter, and hashtag justice for Darius trended across platforms. Influencers, activists and politicians began weighing in. Mayor Thompson of Memphis held a press conference. "We are investigating this incident with full transparency. No officer is above accountability." Inside the precinct, the mood was tense. Reporters camped outside. Officers whispered in corners. Chief Morris called an emergency meeting. "We are under fire," she said bluntly, and rightfully so. Reynolds and Kincaid were placed on administrative leave pending full investigation. They exited the building to a barrage of cameras, heads down, faces flushed. Meanwhile, Darius sat in his apartment, his phone buzzing non-stop. His colleagues from the bureau called. "You handled it with class," one said. "You could have blown up right there." "I wanted change," Darius replied. "Not headlines." He gave only one interview, to a local black journalist. Calmly he said, "This isn't about me, it's about a broken system. It could have been anyone. I just happened to have a badge." By nightfall, the FBI released a statement supporting Darius and confirming his status as an active federal agent in good standing. The city was watching. And so was the nation. Inside the Internal Affairs boardroom, an emergency disciplinary hearing was held. Reynolds and Kincaid sat on one side of the long table, visibly sweating. Across from them sat Darius, calm, hands folded. Officer Wallace led the session. "Officer Reynolds, Officer Kincaid, you are being investigated for unlawful arrest, use of force without probable cause and racial profiling," Wallace began. Kincaid stammered. "We had a description." Wallace raised a hand, "which matched nearly half the population of this city." Darius leaned forward. "I told them I was innocent, I was calm, they didn't care." Wallace turned to him. "Agent King, do you wish to press charges?" Darius paused. "No. But I want this to lead to real change." Reynolds finally spoke. "We didn't know he was FBI." "You shouldn't need a badge to be treated like a human," Darius said coldly. Chief Morris entered midway. "This department will not tolerate this behavior. We've failed in our training, in our leadership, and in our trust." Wallace announced both officers would be suspended indefinitely, pending further state review. Outside, protesters gathered chanting. Signs read "Justice for Darius" and "End racial profiling now." Darius left the building quietly. That night he met with Chief Morris privately. She looked exhausted. "You've sparked something here," she said. "Would you consider helping us fix it?" Darius tilted his head. "You mean from the inside?" She nodded. "You know the system. Help us reform it." Darius didn't answer immediately, but a seed had been planted. Maybe the answer wasn't just punishment. Maybe it was prevention. A week later, Darius stood before a room full of Memphis PD officers, some curious, others resentful. He had accepted Chief Morris's offer to become the city's first ever civil rights liaison, bridging federal standards with local policing. He began his speech simply, "You don't have to agree with me. You just have to listen." Silence. "Some of you think I'm here to lecture. I'm not. I'm here because what happened to me could have happened to someone without a badge. And it has. Over and over." Some officers shifted uncomfortably, others leaned in. Darius explained how bias, often unconscious, drives split-second decisions. It's not just about intent, it's about impact. He didn't scold, he didn't shame, he told stories. Of kids stopped for walking home, of veterans profiled in airports, of mothers crying at jail doors. By the end, one officer, Latino and young, raised a hand. "What do we do now?" "Start by seeing people as people," Darius replied. The next few days he led small group sessions. He walked through the use of force policy. He played footage, his own, and others. He challenged assumptions without attacking character. And slowly, some minds began to shift, even skeptical ones. One officer approached him after class. "I've been a cop 19 years, thought I'd seen it all, but I didn't see this." Darius nodded. "Now you do." This wasn't easy work, but it was necessary, and it was only the beginning. After weeks of silence, Reynolds and Kincaid were summoned back, not to patrol but to face the Civilian Oversight Board. The hearing was public, cameras rolled, protesters waited outside. Darius attended quietly, sitting in the back. The board chair read the charges: racial profiling, excessive force, failure to follow protocol. Kincaid looked defeated. Reynolds, however, still bristled. "I didn't intend to cause harm," Reynolds insisted. "We thought he was a suspect." "But you didn't verify before using force," a board member replied. "Because of how he looked," another added. Kincaid finally broke. "We messed up. Bad. I see that now." Reynolds remained silent. Then the board asked Darius if he wanted to say anything. He stood slowly. "You judged me before you knew me, but you've been judged now. This isn't vengeance, it's accountability." The board ruled Reynolds' badge was permanently revoked. Kincaid was suspended for 6 months and ordered to complete 200 hours of community service and bias training. Justice wasn't perfect, but it was real. Outside, reporters swarmed. Darius spoke briefly. "I don't want to be the exception. I want to be the example." Then he walked away, not with anger, but with resolve. Because real change had begun. And there was more to do. Darius's story caught the attention of Washington. Within weeks he was invited to speak before a congressional committee on police reform. Dressed sharply in a navy suit, Darius addressed lawmakers from both parties. "I'm not here to attack law enforcement. I'm part of it," he said. "But I'm also a black man in America, and that reality nearly cost me my dignity, and almost cost others their lives." He outlined reforms: nationwide training standards, mandatory body cams, an independent civilian oversight board for every state. His testimony made headlines. Lawmakers applauded his grace under pressure. Later, in private, a senator told him, "Your story's changing minds." Back in Memphis, Darius's sessions were now being studied nationwide. Police academies asked for his materials. Other cities called to bring him in. One night, watching the news, Darius saw his name beside the words "Model for Change." He turned off the TV and smiled faintly. Not because he was proud, but because progress had finally begun. 3 months after his arrest, Darius walked the same park trail where it all began. This time, heads didn't turn in suspicion, they nodded in recognition. A young black boy on a scooter skidded to a stop. "Are you the agent from the video?" Darius chuckled. "Yeah, that's me. You're cool," the boy said, then zoomed off. 2 uniformed officers approached him, new recruits. "Agent King, we've been assigned to your training program. We just wanted to say, thank you." Darius smiled. "Glad to hear it." The streets felt different, not perfect, but lighter. A memorial bench had been placed at the park entrance. A brass plaque read, "In honor of justice and the journey to it, dedicated to Agent Darius King." It wasn't ego that made Darius pause. It was hope. Later, as he stood on the rooftop of the precinct building, looking over Memphis, he whispered to himself, "This started with a mistake." But what came next was a movement. 1 year later, Darius King stood in front of the newly opened Justice and Reform Training Center, a program he had designed from scratch. With support from the FBI, local government, and national grants, the center was dedicated to training officers with empathy, accountability, and real-world case studies. The first class of 50 cadets stood at attention, ready to learn. Darius looked at them and said, "You will wear a badge, but never forget, you're wearing it for the people." Applause followed. Later that evening, he sat on a bench outside, now named King's Corner, sipping coffee. Chief Morris joined him. "You ever think it would end like this?" she asked. Darius smiled. "It hasn't ended, it's just beginning." News of his curriculum spread. International police forces reached out. Documentaries were filmed. A book deal was offered. But for Darius, fame was never the goal. Justice was, change was. And now, others were continuing the work. The officers who once doubted him now stood beside him. Citizens felt heard. Kids like the one on the scooter grew up knowing that being black and bold wasn't a threat, it was a strength. From wrongful arrest to national reform, Darius King's story wasn't just about one man. It was about what happens when the system is forced to see, and once seen, it cannot look away.